The scream tore through the dusty street of Lincoln, Nebraska like a knife through canvas, and every soul within earshot froze in their tracks as the young woman collapsed in front of the general store, her body convulsing violently against the wooden planks of the boardwalk. Victoria Morgan had been carrying a basket of eggs when the fit seized her, and now those eggs lay shattered around her thrashing form like broken promises, their golden yolks mixing with the red dust that seemed to coat everything in this frontier town in the summer of 1876. Dr. Samuel Hutchins rushed from his office across the street, his medical bag clutched tight in one hand as he pushed through the gathering crowd of gawkers. He knelt beside Victoria, his weathered face creasing with concern as he tried to hold her steady through the violent spasms that racked her slender frame. Her dark hair had come loose from its careful pins, spreading across the dusty boards like spilled ink, and her green eyes rolled back in her head as unintelligible sounds spilled from her lips. "Give her space," the doctor barked at the onlookers, most of whom were muttering prayers or making signs against evil. In a town like Lincoln, where superstition ran as deep as the Platte River, a woman having fits was either possessed by demons or touched by madness. Neither option boded well for her future. Deacon Colter had been loading supplies onto his pack horse when the commotion started. He stood a full 6 feet 3 inches tall, with shoulders broad enough to block out the afternoon sun and arms corded with muscle from years of trapping in the mountains north of town. His dark hair hung past his shoulders, tied back with a leather cord that was coming loose, and his beard was thick and neatly trimmed despite his rough lifestyle. He wore buckskin pants and a simple cotton shirt that strained against his powerful chest, and his blue eyes were sharp as flint as he watched the scene unfold. Something about the woman's distress called to him in a way he could not name. He had lived alone in the mountains for the better part of 8 years, coming to town only when he needed supplies or when the loneliness grew too heavy to bear. He had learned to trust his instincts up there among the pines and the granite peaks, and right now those instincts were telling him that this woman needed help beyond what the doctor could provide. Victoria's convulsions began to slow, and finally she lay still on the boardwalk, her chest heaving as she gasped for breath. Her eyes fluttered open, confused and frightened, and tears tracked through the dust on her cheeks. Dr. Hutchins helped her sit up carefully, his expression grave. "That is the 3rd time this month, Miss Morgan," he said quietly, though his voice carried in the sudden silence. "These fits are getting worse. I fear your mind is fracturing under some terrible strain. You need rest and perhaps confinement for your own safety and the safety of others." "No," Victoria whispered, her voice hoarse. "Please, Dr. Hutchins, I am not mad. I swear I'm not. I just need time. I just need—" "What you need is care," the doctor interrupted, not unkindly. "Your aunt cannot manage you alone, and I worry what might happen if one of these fits strikes when you are near fire or water or some other danger. Lincoln has no proper asylum, but there is a facility in Omaha that specializes in disorders of the female mind. Perhaps a few months there would—" "She has fits of madness," someone in the crowd shouted, and several others murmured agreement. "She will bring judgment on this whole town." Deacon found himself moving forward before he had consciously decided to do so. The crowd parted before him automatically, the way smaller animals give way to a bear. He knelt beside Victoria and Dr. Hutchins, and up close he could see that the woman was younger than he had first thought, perhaps 22 or 23, with a delicate face that would have been beautiful if not for the terror and exhaustion etched into her features. "What causes the fits?" he asked the doctor directly, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his chest. Dr. Hutchins looked up at him with surprise. Most mountain men avoided involvement in town affairs, preferring to conduct their business and leave as quickly as possible. "I cannot say for certain, Mr. Colter. It could be epilepsy or hysteria or any number of afflictions that strike young women. The mind is a delicate instrument, especially in females, and easily disordered." Deacon looked at Victoria, and she met his gaze with those startling green eyes. He saw no madness there, only fear and a desperate kind of courage. "What do you think causes them?" he asked her. She blinked, clearly surprised that anyone would ask her opinion about her own condition. "I do not know," she admitted. "They started after my parents died 6 months ago, the wagon accident. I was there when it happened, and sometimes when I close my eyes I see it all again, and then the world goes dark and strange, And when I wake up, time has passed, and everyone looks at me like I am something broken. Grief can disorder the mind terribly, Dr. Hutchins said, shaking his head. All the more reason for professional treatment. All the more reason for time and patience, Deacon countered. He stood and offered Victoria his hand. She hesitated only a moment before taking it, and he pulled her to her feet with such easy strength that she barely had to use her own muscles. She swayed slightly, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. Even through the fabric of her dress sleeve, he could feel how delicate her bones were, like a bird's. It stirred something protective in him that he had not felt in years. Mr. Colter, I appreciate your concern, but Miss Morgan's care is not your responsibility, the doctor said firmly. Maybe not, Deacon acknowledged, but I know something about grief and isolation. I know what it is like to carry weight that feels too heavy to bear. And I know these mountains and forests better than any man alive. If the lady needs rest and peace away from prying eyes and wagging tongues, I can provide that. A shocked murmur ran through the crowd. Victoria's aunt, Martha Simmons, pushed her way forward, her round face flushed with indignation. You cannot possibly be suggesting that my niece go off into the wilderness with a stranger? The impropriety alone would destroy her reputation, to say nothing of the danger. Her reputation seems to be suffering well enough right here in town, Deacon observed. And as for danger, I have lived in those mountains for 8 years without losing so much as a finger to bear or wolf or hostile tribe. I know how to keep someone safe. This is highly irregular, Dr. Hutchins protested. Miss Morgan requires medical supervision, not some wilderness isolation that might make her condition worse. Does your medical supervision seem to be helping? Deacon asked bluntly. You just said yourself the fits are getting worse. Maybe what she needs is not medicine, but peace. Time away from the place where her parents died. Time to let her mind heal without everyone watching and judging and calling her mad. Victoria found her voice, though it trembled. I would like to go, she said. I would rather take my chances in the mountains than be sent to an asylum where they will lock me away and treat me like a lunatic. Aunt Martha, please. I need to get away from here. Everything reminds me of them. Every street corner, every shop, every face. I cannot grieve properly when I am constantly afraid of having another fit and confirming everyone's worst suspicions about me. Martha Simmons looked torn between propriety and genuine concern for her niece. She had taken Victoria in after the accident, but the girl's fits had frightened her, and she had already been making discreet inquiries about institutions. Perhaps sending Victoria off with this mountain man was scandalous, but it was also convenient. If the girl came back cured, it would be a miracle. If she did not come back at all, well, at least Martha would not have to explain another embarrassing public collapse. If she goes with you, you must promise to protect her virtue as well as her safety, Martha said finally, and you must bring her back before the first snow. The scandal will be bad enough without adding months of unexplained absence to it. I give you my word, Deacon said solemnly. She will be as safe with me as a sister. I have a cabin with 2 rooms, and she will have her privacy. I will hunt and provide for her needs, and she will have time and space to heal. Nothing more. Dr. Hutchins looked deeply unhappy but recognized when he was outmaneuvered. Very well, but Miss Morgan, if the fits continue or worsen, you must return to town immediately. And Mr. Colter, if her condition deteriorates, you will be held responsible. Understood, Deacon said. He looked at Victoria again, and this time he saw a flicker of hope in her eyes that made his chest tighten. Can you be ready to leave tomorrow morning? I can be ready in an hour, she said quietly. I have little enough to pack, and I'm eager to leave this place. Tomorrow is better, he said gently. You need rest after that fit, and I need to get additional supplies if I am to have a guest for several months. Meet me here at dawn and bring only what you can carry in a single bag. The mountains are not kind to excess. The crowd began to disperse, many shaking their heads at the strange arrangement but also relieved to be rid of the mad girl who had been causing such a stir. Deacon went back to his pack horse and began making a mental list of what he would need. More flour and salt and coffee, another blanket, perhaps some fabric for making curtains if his cabin's second room needed more privacy. He had built that second room years ago with some vague notion that he might someday have a wife or child, but it had remained empty, gathering dust and hosting the occasional mouse. As he worked through his list, he found himself thinking about Victoria Morgan's face, the way fear and hope had warred in her expression, the way her hand had felt in his, small and trusting. He told himself he was just being charitable, helping someone in need, but there was something deeper stirring in him, something he had thought long buried under years of isolation and self-reliance. That evening, Victoria sat in her aunt's parlor and carefully folded her few possessions into a worn carpet bag. Martha hovered nearby, alternating between worry and relief, offering advice that Victoria mostly ignored. "You must be careful," Martha said. "Mountain men are rough creatures, little better than savages themselves. Do not let him take liberties. Do not encourage improper behavior. Keep yourself covered and modest at all times." "I will be fine, Aunt Martha," Victoria said quietly. "Mr. Colter seems like a good man, and honestly, anything is better than staying here where everyone thinks I am losing my mind." "Are you losing your mind?" Martha asked bluntly. "Tell me true, child. Do you hear voices? See things that are not there?" "No," Victoria said firmly. "I just have these moments where the memories become too strong, too real, and then everything goes black. When I wake up, I am told I was thrashing and screaming, but I remember none of it. It is like a door closes in my mind, and I am not allowed to see what happens behind it." "That sounds like madness to me," Martha said with a shudder. "Then call it madness," Victoria replied, a touch of bitterness creeping into her voice. "But it is my madness, and I will deal with it in my own way. If time in the mountains can help me find peace, then I will go to the mountains. If it cannot, well, at least I will have tried something other than locking myself away in an asylum." She finished packing and set the bag by her bedroom door. That night she barely slept, staring at the ceiling and trying to imagine what her life would be like in Deacon Colter's mountain cabin. She knew almost nothing about him except his name and his reputation as a skilled trapper. People in town spoke of him with a mixture of respect and wariness, acknowledging his competence while remaining slightly afraid of his size and solitary nature. But when she closed her eyes and thought about him, she did not feel fear. She remembered the way he had looked at her, not with pity or disgust, but with something like understanding. She remembered the gentle strength in his hand when he had helped her to her feet. For the first time in 6 months, she felt something other than despair and terror. She felt possibility. Dawn came cold and clear, the sky lightening from black to deep blue to pale gold, as Victoria made her way to the general store where she had agreed to meet Deacon. He was already there, standing beside 2 horses loaded with supplies. One was his own sturdy mountain horse, a dappled gray gelding with intelligent eyes. The other was a smaller bay mare with a gentle disposition. "That is for you," he said, gesturing to the mare. "Her name is Sage, and she is sure-footed on mountain trails. Can you ride?" "My father taught me," Victoria said, feeling a pang at the memory. "I am not expert, but I can manage." "That will do," Deacon said. He took her carpet bag and secured it to Sage's saddle, then helped Victoria mount. His hands were careful and respectful, touching her only as much as necessary to boost her into the saddle. Once she was settled, he mounted his own horse with an easy grace, surprising for a man his size. They rode out of Lincoln as the sun broke over the horizon, painting the prairie grasses gold and orange. Victoria did not look back at the town. She kept her eyes fixed forward toward the distant line of mountains that rose blue and mysterious against the western sky. Behind her, she could feel the weight of the town's judgment and suspicion falling away with each mile they covered. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also freedom. They rode in silence for the first few hours, following a well-worn trail that led northwest toward the pine forests and granite peaks. Deacon set a steady but not punishing pace, clearly mindful of Victoria's limited riding experience. Around midday, he called a halt near a small creek where the horses could drink and rest. "How are you holding up?" he asked as he helped her dismount. Her legs were shaky from hours in the saddle, and she had to hold on to Sage's saddle for a moment to steady herself. "I am well enough," she said, though in truth her backside ached and her thighs burned from gripping the saddle. "How much farther is it?" 2 more days if we keep this pace," he said. 3 if you need to go slower. There is no rush. The cabin will be there whenever we arrive." He unpacked some bread and dried meat from his saddlebags and shared it with her. They sat on a fallen log by the creek, eating in companionable silence and watching the water flow over smooth stones. Victoria found herself studying him from the corner of her eye, noting the way his large hands handled even small objects with surprising delicacy, the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings as if cataloging every bird call and rustling leaf. "Why did you help me?" she asked finally. "You do not know me. You gain nothing from taking on the burden of a woman with fits of madness." He was quiet for a moment, chewing his bread slowly as he considered his answer. "I told you I know about grief and isolation," he said finally. 8 years ago I had a wife and a baby daughter. We were living in a settlement about 50 miles north of Lincoln. There was a fever that swept through that winter. They both died within days of each other. Victoria's breath caught. "I'm so sorry." He nodded, accepting her sympathy without comment. "After they died, I could not stand to be around people anymore. All the well-meaning condolences, all the pitying looks, all the suggestions that I should move on and start again, as if my family was something I could just replace. So I took my traps and my rifle, and I went into the mountains. I built a cabin in a valley where no one else goes, and I learned to live with my grief in my own way." "Did it help?" Victoria asked softly. "The isolation?" "Yes and no," he admitted. "It gave me space to feel what I needed to feel without judgment. It let me rage and weep and make my peace with loss in my own time. But it also kept me frozen in place. For 8 years I've been living like a ghost, going through the motions of survival, but never really living. When I saw you on that boardwalk, terrified and hurting and surrounded by people who wanted to lock you away for the crime of grieving too loudly, I saw myself, and I thought maybe helping you might help me remember what it is like to be human again." His honesty was startling and deeply moving. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes, but they were different from the tears of fear and frustration she had cried so often lately. These were tears of connection, of being understood. "I have fits of loving her only," she whispered, not entirely sure why those words came to her. Deacon looked at her with a question in his eyes. "My mother," Victoria explained. "When people say I have fits of madness, what I really have are fits of remembering her, of reliving that moment when the wagon wheel broke and everything went wrong, of seeing her face and hearing her scream and knowing I could do nothing to save her. The grief is so strong sometimes that it takes over my entire body, and I suppose from the outside it looks like madness, but it is just love with nowhere to go." "I have fits of loving her only," Deacon repeated quietly. "The doctor swears you are mad, but what you have is a heart too full of love for the living world to contain. I understand that better than I can say." They sat together in the afternoon sunshine, two wounded souls finding unexpected solace in each other's company. When they resumed their journey, Victoria felt lighter than she had in months, as if sharing her truth with someone who truly understood had lifted some of the crushing weight from her chest. That night they made camp in a sheltered spot beneath a stand of cottonwood trees. Deacon built a fire with practiced efficiency and cooked a simple meal of beans and bacon. He set up a canvas shelter for Victoria and gave her several blankets, insisting she take the warmest ones since she was not accustomed to sleeping outdoors. He made his own bed on the opposite side of the fire, keeping a respectful distance. As Victoria lay wrapped in her blankets, staring up at stars more numerous than she had ever seen in town, she thought about Deacon Colter's story and his unexpected kindness. She thought about the way his presence made her feel safe rather than afraid, protected rather than threatened. And she thought about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, this journey into the mountains would heal more than just her grief. The second day of travel took them higher into the foothills, where the prairie grass gave way to stands of pine and aspen. The air grew cooler and clearer, scented with resin and wild herbs. Victoria's muscles ached from riding, but she found herself enjoying the physical exertion and the constantly changing landscape. Deacon pointed out various plants and animal tracks, teaching her the signs of the wilderness with the patience of a natural instructor. "That is elk sign," he said, indicating hoofprints in soft earth near a stream. "A small herd passed through here maybe 2 days ago. And those scratches on that pine tree, see how high they go? Bear marking his territory. We will want to hang our food high tonight so we do not attract any curious visitors." "Are there many bears?" Victoria asked, feeling a flutter of nervousness. Enough, Deacon said with a slight smile. But they mostly want to be left alone, same as anyone. Make noise when you are walking so you do not surprise them, and do not keep food in your sleeping area. Follow those rules and you will likely never have a problem. They stopped for lunch beside a waterfall that cascaded down a granite cliff face into a clear pool below. The sound of rushing water was almost overwhelming after the quiet of the forest, and Victoria found it strangely soothing. Deacon caught several trout from the pool with remarkable speed, using his hands rather than a rod and line. "How did you do that?" Victoria asked, amazed. "Patience and practice," he said, cleaning the fish with a sharp knife. "You learn to read the water, see where the fish like to rest in the current. Then you move slowly, slowly, until your hand is under them, and you flip them up onto the bank before they know what happened." He cooked the trout over a small fire, and Victoria thought she had never tasted anything so delicious. The flesh was delicate and sweet, flavored with wild herbs that Deacon had gathered from the forest floor. As they ate, he told her more about the mountains, about the seasons and the animals and the small miracles of survival that happened every day in the wild. "It is a hard life," he admitted, "but it is honest. The mountains do not care about your reputation or your family name or what people think of you. They care only about whether you are strong enough and smart enough to respect their rules. There is a kind of freedom in that." "I think I am beginning to understand that freedom," Victoria said. "For the first time in months, I have gone a whole day without thinking about what people are saying about me or whether I am about to have another fit. I have just been existing, moment to moment, and it is such a relief." "Good," Deacon said, and the approval in his voice warmed her more than the fire. That night, as they camped in a meadow carpeted with wildflowers, Victoria felt something shift inside her. She caught herself watching Deacon as he moved around the camp, noting the way firelight played across his bearded face, the way his powerful shoulders moved beneath his shirt, the gentleness in his rough hands. He was unlike any man she had ever known, both dangerous and safe at the same time, and she found herself drawn to him in ways that both thrilled and frightened her. She tried to tell herself it was just gratitude, just the natural connection between two people who had shared their pain. But when he caught her looking at him and smiled, a real smile that lit up his usually serious face, her heart stuttered in her chest, and she knew it was something more. They reached Deacon's Valley late on the third day, descending a narrow trail that wound between towering pines and granite outcrops. The valley opened up before them like a secret garden, a bowl of green meadow surrounded by protective mountains and bisected by a clear stream. Deacon's cabin sat on a slight rise above the stream, built from hand-hewn logs and chinked with moss and clay. It had a stone chimney, a sturdy roof, and a covered porch where animal pelts were stretched on frames. "It is not fancy," Deacon said, suddenly sounding almost shy, "but it is solid and warm and dry." "It is beautiful," Victoria said honestly. The cabin looked like it had grown from the land itself, as natural and right as the trees around it. "I love it." He helped her dismount and led both horses to a small corral behind the cabin where they could graze and rest. Then he showed Victoria inside, lighting an oil lamp to dispel the dimness. The main room had a stone fireplace, a rough table and chairs, shelves lined with supplies, and a narrow bed in one corner. A doorway led to the second room, which was smaller but had a window looking out over the valley and a simple bed frame with a rope mattress. "This will be your room," Deacon said. "I will bring in your things and get a fire started. The nights get cold up here, even in summer." Victoria walked to the window and looked out at the valley below. The sun was setting behind the western peaks, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. She felt a profound sense of peace settle over her, as if she had finally found a place where she could breathe. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a comfortable routine. Deacon rose before dawn to check his trap lines and hunt, always returning by mid-morning with meat or pelts to prepare. Victoria took over the cooking and the mending, grateful to have useful work to occupy her hands and mind. She learned to make bread in the cabin's small oven, to smoke meat and fish for preservation, to identify edible plants and herbs. Most importantly, she learned about Deacon. She learned that he sang old ballads while skinning animals, his deep voice surprisingly melodic. She learned that he carved small animals from wood during the long evenings, filling a shelf with delicate deer and bears and birds. She learned that he was patient and thoughtful, and far more educated than his rough exterior suggested, having been a schoolteacher before tragedy drove him to the mountains. And she learned that she was falling in love with him. It happened gradually, like the changing of seasons, so that she could not point to any single moment and say that was when it began. It was in the way he remembered she liked her coffee strong and always made sure the pot was hot when she woke. It was in the way he taught her to shoot his rifle, standing behind her with his arms around her to guide her aim, his presence solid and warm. It was in the way he listened when she talked about her parents, never trying to minimize her grief or rush her healing. And she began to notice that he looked at her differently now. His eyes would linger on her face when he thought she was not paying attention. He would find excuses to stand close to her, to brush her hand when passing her a plate, to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear when the wind blew it loose. The air between them grew charged with possibility, with things unspoken but deeply felt. One afternoon, about 6 weeks into her stay, Victoria was gathering wild raspberries in a sunny clearing near the cabin when she felt the familiar darkness beginning to gather at the edges of her vision. She had time to think, oh no, not now, before the world tilted and the memories came crashing over her. The wagon wheel breaking, her mother's scream, her father's desperate attempt to control the terrified horses, the sickening sensation of falling, tumbling, everything going wrong. When she came back to herself, she was lying in soft grass with Deacon kneeling beside her, one large hand cradling her head. His face was creased with concern, but not fear, not disgust. "There you are," he said softly. "You have been gone about 10 minutes. Are you hurt?" Victoria took inventory of her body and shook her head. "Just shaken." "Did I scream?" "Some," he admitted. "And you thrashed a bit. But mostly you just seemed to be somewhere else, somewhere painful. I held you so you would not hurt yourself on the rocks, and I waited for you to come back." Tears began to slide down her temples into her hair. "I thought they had stopped. I have not had a fit since we arrived in the valley. I thought maybe I was getting better." "You are getting better," Deacon said firmly. "This is the first in 6 weeks, and you said you were having them nearly every day in town. That is progress, Victoria. Healing is not a straight line. There will be setbacks, but they do not erase how far you have already come." He helped her sit up slowly, keeping a supporting arm around her shoulders. "What brought it on, do you think?" Victoria considered the question. "I was happy," she said slowly. "I was standing in the sunshine eating raspberries and thinking how beautiful the valley is, and I was just happy. And then I felt guilty for being happy when my parents are dead, and I thought about how my mother used to love raspberries, and then the memory came and took me under." "Guilt is a powerful trap," Deacon said. "After my wife and daughter died, I felt guilty every time I laughed or enjoyed a sunset or took pleasure in anything. It felt like a betrayal, like I was dishonoring their memory by continuing to live. It took me years to understand that they would want me to be happy, that the best way to honor people we love is not to bury our joy with them, but to live fully in their memory." "How do you live fully when part of your heart is missing?" Victoria asked. "You let someone else help you carry the weight," Deacon said. "You build new love alongside the old, not to replace it, but to give you strength to bear it." Their faces were very close together, his arms still around her shoulders, and Victoria could see gold flecks in his blue eyes. She could feel his breath on her face, smell the clean scent of pine and leather that always clung to him. "Deacon," she whispered, not entirely sure what she was asking for. He understood anyway. "I have tried to be honorable," he said, his voice rough. "I brought you here to heal, not to take advantage of your vulnerability. I promised your aunt I would protect your virtue. But Victoria, I need you to know that somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you. Not with the idea of having someone to fill the emptiness, but with you specifically. Your courage and your kindness, and the way you sing while you cook, and the way you laugh at my terrible jokes. I have fits of loving you, and I do not know how to stop." Victoria's heart felt like it might burst. "The doctor swore I have fits of madness," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "But you see the truth of me. You see that what looks like madness is really love, and grief tangled together. And I have fallen in love with you too, Deacon. I have tried not to, because it seems too fast, too soon. But I cannot help it. You make me feel safe and seen and alive in a way I have not felt since before my parents died." He cupped her face in his large, calloused hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "I do not want to rush you. I know you are still healing, and I know you need time, but I also know that life is short and precious, and wasting time on fear and propriety when two people could be happy together seems like the real madness." "Then be mad with me," Victoria said, and she closed the distance between them and kissed him. His lips were warm and gentle, and he kissed her with a reverence that made her feel cherished. It was not a wild, desperate kiss, but something deeper and more meaningful, a promise sealed with breath and touch. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "We should go back to the cabin," Deacon said. "The sun is setting, and we should talk about what this means." They walked back hand in hand, and Victoria felt like she was floating. That evening, they sat together on the cabin's porch and talked late into the night about their future. Deacon made it clear he wanted to marry her if she would have him, but he also wanted her to be certain. "I will not be the thing you cling to because you are afraid and hurting," he said seriously. "I want you to choose me because I am what you truly want, not because I am convenient or safe." "You are what I want," Victoria said firmly. "And yes, part of what I want is safety and protection, but that is not weakness, Deacon. That is wisdom. I want your strength and your kindness. I want to wake up every morning and see these mountains. I want to build a life with you that honors both our pasts and creates a new future. I want to have children and teach them about their grandparents and your first family so that all the love we have carried does not disappear but gets passed down and multiplied. I want you, Deacon Colter, and I want this life you have built here." "Then you shall have it," he said, pulling her close and kissing her forehead. "But we will do this right. When autumn comes and we can travel safely, we will go back to Lincoln and have a proper wedding. I will not have anyone saying I ruined you or took advantage. We will speak our vows before witnesses and begin our marriage with honor." "And until then?" Victoria asked, a little breathless at the thought of waiting months. "Until then, we wait," Deacon said firmly, though she could hear the strain in his voice. "We share this cabin as friends who are courting, and we keep our hands and hearts in check until we have spoken our vows. It will not be easy, but it will be right." Victoria respected his conviction, even as her body yearned for more of his touch. She recognized the wisdom in waiting, in building their relationship on a foundation of trust and respect rather than just passion. But she also made a mental note to push for a quick wedding once they returned to town. The summer passed in a golden haze of happiness. Victoria's fits became less frequent, occurring only once or twice more, and even then less violently than before. She and Deacon spent their days working side by side and their evenings talking or reading or simply sitting together in comfortable silence. He taught her to fish and track animals and read the weather in the clouds. She taught him to cook more than just basic trail food and introduced him to games her parents had played with her as a child. They were careful with their physical affection, keeping to chaste kisses and held hands, but the connection between them deepened daily. Victoria learned the landscape of Deacon's heart, all its scars and strengths. He learned hers in turn, and they began to weave their histories together into something new. In late August, Victoria woke one morning and realized she had not had a fit in over a month. More than that, she had gone entire days without thinking about the accident or her parents' deaths. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it had transformed from a crushing weight into something more manageable, a sadness she could carry without being destroyed by it. "I think I am healed," she told Deacon that morning over breakfast. "Not completely, not perfectly. I will always miss them, and I may always have moments when the memories overwhelm me, but I am no longer broken. I can live with this now." "You were never broken," Deacon said gently. "You were wounded, and wounds take time to heal. But yes, I can see the change in you. You smile more easily now. You sleep through the night. You have found your balance." "Because of you," Victoria said. "Because you gave me space and time and love without judgment. Because you believed I was worth saving." "We saved each other," Deacon corrected. "You gave me a reason to come back to life. You reminded me that love does not end just because people die, and that opening your heart again is not betrayal, but courage. We healed each other, Victoria, and now we get to build on that healing for the rest of our lives. In early September, as the aspen leaves began to turn gold and the nights grew crisp, they prepared for the journey back to Lincoln. Victoria had mixed feelings about returning to town, but she was also eager to marry Deacon and begin their life together officially. They packed carefully, bringing gifts of meat and pelts to sell so they would have money for a wedding and supplies. The journey down from the mountains took 3 days, and when they rode into Lincoln on a bright September morning, Victoria sat tall in her saddle with her head high. She was not the terrified, broken woman who had left town months ago. She was stronger now, surer of herself and her place in the world. Martha Simmons nearly fainted when she saw them. "Victoria, praise the Lord, you are alive and well. We had begun to fear the worst." "I am better than well, Aunt Martha," Victoria said warmly. "I am healed. The time in the mountains gave me exactly what I needed." Dr. Hutchins was summoned to examine her, and he found her in excellent health with no signs of nervous disorder. "Remarkable," he murmured. "I confess I did not think wilderness isolation would help, but you seem entirely recovered. The fits have stopped?" "Nearly entirely," Victoria confirmed. "I had a few in the first weeks, but they became less frequent and less severe. I have not had one in over a month now." "And your mental state? Any signs of melancholy or disorder?" "I am happy," Victoria said simply. "For the first time since my parents died, I am genuinely happy. I will always grieve them, but the grief no longer controls me." The doctor shook his head in wonder. "Then I suppose I must admit that Mr. Colter's unconventional treatment was more effective than my own would have been. I am glad to have been proven wrong." Deacon and Victoria met with the local minister to arrange a wedding for the following week. The minister, a practical man who had seen enough frontier hardship to be less concerned with strict propriety than with genuine faith, agreed to perform the ceremony after speaking with them about their intentions and beliefs. The wedding was a simple affair held in the small white church at the edge of town. Martha Simmons attended, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Dr. Hutchins came, along with several townspeople who were curious to see whether the madwoman would make it through the ceremony without a fit. But mostly, it was just Victoria and Deacon standing before the minister, speaking vows that came from the deepest part of their hearts. "I take you as my husband," Victoria said, her voice clear and strong. "I promise to love you in health and in sickness, in joy and in sorrow, all the days of my life. You saw me when I was broken and you helped me become whole. You gave me shelter in your mountain home and in your heart. I will honor that gift every day for the rest of my life." "I take you as my wife," Deacon said, his deep voice rough with emotion. "I promise to love you and protect you and stand beside you in all things. You brought me back from the lonely places and taught me that love does not die, but transforms. You gave me reason to live again, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret taking that chance on a mountain man who had forgotten how to be human." They exchanged simple gold bands, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Deacon kissed Victoria with such tenderness that several people in attendance were moved to tears. Victoria kissed him back joyfully, no longer afraid of what people thought or what tomorrow might bring. She had found her home and her heart's desire, and nothing else mattered. They spent one night in Lincoln at the hotel, wanting privacy for their wedding night, away from Martha's prying concern. Deacon carried Victoria over the threshold of their room, both of them laughing at the tradition. He set her down gently and cupped her face in his hands. "Are you certain you are ready for this?" he asked. "We have waited this long. We can wait longer if you need more time." "I am done waiting," Victoria said firmly. She began unbuttoning his shirt, her fingers trembling slightly with nervousness and anticipation. "I am your wife now, Deacon. I want all of you." He caught her hands and kissed her palms, then helped her unfasten the buttons of her wedding dress. They undressed each other slowly, carefully, learning the landscape of each other's bodies with reverent touches. Deacon was gentle with her, conscious that this was her first time, taking care to make sure she felt safe and cherished. When they finally came together, it was not wild or desperate, but something deep and almost sacred, a joining that went beyond mere physical pleasure. Victoria felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy and completion. In Deacon's arms, she felt utterly safe and utterly free at the same time. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the narrow hotel bed, and Deacon traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I love you," he said quietly. "I have fits of loving you, Victoria Colter, and I never want to be cured." "Then we will be mad together," she said, echoing her words from that day in the raspberry clearing. "The world can say what it wants. We know the truth." The next morning they bought supplies and began the journey back to the mountain valley that was now their home. This time, the trip felt different, full of promise and excitement rather than desperation and fear. They were returning not as a patient and caretaker, but as husband and wife, ready to build a life together. That first winter in the cabin was hard in the ways that mountain winters always are, with snow piling high and temperatures dropping brutally low. But Victoria found she loved the challenge of it, the way she and Deacon worked together to keep the fire burning and the supplies managed. They spent long evenings by the fireplace, reading aloud to each other from the small collection of books Deacon had accumulated over the years, or simply talking about their hopes and dreams. Victoria taught Deacon some of the card games her parents had taught her, and he taught her to play chess on a battered set he had carved from wood. They cooked together, trying new recipes and laughing when experiments went wrong. And they made love with increasing confidence and joy, learning each other's bodies and preferences, building an intimacy that went far beyond the physical. In the spring, Victoria discovered she was pregnant. The realization filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She worried that she might pass her fits on to her child, or that the strain of pregnancy might bring them back. But Deacon simply pulled her into his arms and told her they would face whatever came together. "This child will be born of love and healing," he said. "That is a powerful foundation. Whatever challenges come, we will meet them as a family." Victoria's pregnancy progressed smoothly through the warm months of summer. She continued to help with the daily work of their homestead, though Deacon insisted on taking over the heavier tasks. In the evenings, he would sit beside her and talk to her belly, telling their unborn child stories about the mountains and the animals and the love that had brought its parents together. One night, as they lay in bed with Deacon's hand resting on her swollen stomach, Victoria asked the question that had been on her mind. "What will we name the baby?" "I've been thinking about that," Deacon said. "If it is a boy, I would like to name him for your father. What was his name?" "James," Victoria said, her voice catching. "James Morgan. You would do that?" "Your parents gave me the most precious gift when they gave me you," Deacon said simply. "Honoring them with our son's name seems right. And if it is a girl, we could name her for my daughter. Her name was Rose." "Rose Morgan Colter," Victoria said softly, "or James Morgan Colter. Either way, they will carry the past forward into the future. I love that, Deacon. I love that you want to remember rather than forget." "Remembering is not the same as being trapped in the past," Deacon said. "We can honor what came before while still building something new. That is what we are doing here. You and I. We are weaving all the threads of our histories into something beautiful and strong." The baby came in late October during the first snowfall of the season. Victoria's labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Deacon feared he would lose her the way he had lost his first wife. But Victoria was strong, strengthened by months of mountain living and by the absolute determination to meet her child. When the baby finally emerged, red-faced and squalling, Deacon caught him in gentle hands and placed him on Victoria's chest. "A boy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "A beautiful, healthy boy." "James," Victoria whispered, tears streaming down her exhausted face. "Welcome to the world, James Morgan Colter. You are so loved already." Deacon cut the cord and cleaned the baby while Victoria rested, then brought him back to her so he could nurse for the first time. He sat beside his wife and new son, one arm around Victoria's shoulders, and marveled at the small miracle they had created together. "I never thought I would have this again," he admitted quietly. "A family, a child, the sound of a baby crying in my home. I thought that part of my life was over forever." "Life has a way of surprising us," Victoria said. "All those months ago I was considered mad and hopeless. Now look at us. We have a home and a child and a love that makes every hardship bearable. The doctor swore I had fits of madness, but you knew better. You knew I just needed time and love to heal." "And you have given me the same," Deacon said. "We healed each other, Victoria. That is what love does when it is real and true. It does not erase the pain, but it makes you strong enough to carry it. They named their son James in a small ceremony they performed themselves, speaking words of blessing over him and promising to raise him with love and wisdom. As the winter closed in around their mountain valley, the little family settled into new rhythms. Victoria learned to nurse and soothe the baby while managing the household work. Deacon adjusted his hunting and trapping schedule so he was never away for too long, wanting to be present for every moment of his son's early life. The baby thrived in the mountain air, growing strong and healthy. He had his mother's green eyes and his father's sturdy build, and he seemed to find the wilderness as natural as breathing. As he grew, he would sit for hours watching the play of light on the creek or the flight of birds across the valley, already developing the observer's eye that served his father so well. When James was 6 months old, Victoria realized she had not had a single fit since his birth. The combination of happiness, purpose, and the all-consuming work of caring for an infant seemed to have finally banished the last traces of her trauma. She mentioned this to Deacon one evening as they sat together watching their son sleep in the small cradle Deacon had built. "I think I am finally, truly healed," she said. "The fits are gone, not just controlled or managed, but actually gone. The grief is still there, but it has become part of me, rather than something that controls me. I can think about my parents now with sadness, but also with joy, remembering the good times rather than just the horror of how they died." "You have done an incredible thing," Deacon said. "You took your pain and your trauma and you transformed it into strength and love. You refused to let grief define you, and you built a new life on the foundations of the old. I am so proud of you, Victoria." "I could not have done it without you," she said honestly. "You gave me the space and time and love I needed to heal. You never tried to rush me or fix me or make me into something I was not. You just believed I would find my way, and that belief gave me the strength to actually do it." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire burn low and listening to their son's soft breathing. Finally, Deacon spoke again. "I think we should tell James about his grandparents as he grows. Not just the facts of their death, but the fullness of their lives. Your mother's love of raspberries and your father's skill with horses and all the small moments that made them who they were. They should live on in our stories." "And we should tell him about Rose and your first wife," Victoria added. "He should know he has a sister who came before, even if she is not here with us. Love does not divide, Deacon. It multiplies. We can love the ones we lost while also loving the ones we have now, and it all makes us richer." Over the next several years, life in the mountain valley fell into a beautiful pattern. James grew into a bright, adventurous boy who loved exploring the wilderness with his father. Deacon taught him to track animals and identify plants and move through the forest like a whisper. Victoria taught him to read and write and do arithmetic, determined that he would have the education necessary to make his own choices about his life when he was grown. When James was 3, Victoria became pregnant again. This time she felt confident and unafraid, knowing her body could handle the rigors of pregnancy and birth. The second labor was shorter than the first, and in the early morning light of a spring day, Victoria delivered a healthy baby girl. "Rose," Deacon said, his voice breaking as he held his tiny daughter. "Our Rose. Named for the sister she will never meet, but who will always be part of our family," Victoria said. "Hello, sweet Rose. You are so loved." Rose had her father's blue eyes and dark hair, and she seemed to have inherited his calm, observant nature. As she grew, she spent hours sitting quietly in the forest, watching animals and learning their habits. James was protective of his little sister, always making sure she was included in his adventures and teaching her everything he learned from their father. The family made occasional trips to Lincoln to sell pelts and buy supplies, and each time Victoria marveled at how different she felt from the terrified young woman who had fled the town all those years ago. She walked the streets with confidence now, her hand in Deacon's, her children at her side. Some people still remembered the stories about her fits of madness, but most saw only a capable frontier woman with a strong family and a good life. Dr. Hutchins, now quite elderly, stopped her once on the street. "Miss Morgan, forgive me, Mrs. Colter," he corrected himself. "I must tell you how glad I am to see you thriving. I confess I thought Mr. Colter's plan was foolishness, but I have never been happier to be proven wrong. You are a testament to the healing power of time and love, and to the power of being believed in," Victoria added gently. "You saw madness, Doctor, but Deacon saw grief and trauma. He understood that what I needed was not confinement or treatment, but space to heal in my own way. Sometimes the best medicine is simply being allowed to be human." The doctor nodded thoughtfully. "I shall remember that. Perhaps I have been too quick to diagnose disorder when what I should have been prescribing was patience and compassion." When James was 7 and Rose was 4, Deacon and Victoria decided to expand their cabin. They wanted more children, and they also wanted more space for the family they already had. Deacon enlisted James's help in cutting and preparing logs, teaching his son the skills of building and construction. Together, they added 2 more rooms to the cabin and built a larger barn for the animals they were gradually accumulating. That winter, as the family sat around the expanded fireplace, Victoria found herself reflecting on how far she had come. 8 years ago, she'd been collapsing on a dusty boardwalk, surrounded by people who thought she was losing her mind. Now she was surrounded by love and warmth, with 2 beautiful children and a husband who still looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. "What are you thinking about?" Deacon asked, noticing her distant expression. "Just remembering," Victoria said. "Remembering that day you offered to take me to the mountains. I was so desperate and afraid, and you were this strange mountain man offering me salvation. I had no idea you were offering me everything." "I had no idea either," Deacon admitted. "I thought I was just helping someone in need. I did not know I was meeting the woman who would give me back my life. You turned my lonely cave into a home, Victoria. You took my isolation and transformed it into connection. You gave me children and laughter and purpose beyond mere survival." "We gave those things to each other," Victoria corrected. "We were both lost and we found each other. And yes, the path was hard and the healing took time, but it was worth every moment of struggle." James, who had been listening with the intense focus children bring to adult conversations they do not quite understand, spoke up. "Papa, did Mama really have fits of madness?" Deacon and Victoria exchanged a glance, and Victoria answered, "Some people thought so, James. After my parents died, I had very strong grief that sometimes overwhelmed me. I would have these moments where my body would react to the pain in ways I could not control. It looked like madness to people who did not understand, but your father saw the truth. He saw that I was not mad, but heartbroken, and that what I needed was time and love to heal. I have fits of loving her only," Deacon added, pulling Victoria close. "When the doctor said your mother was mad, I knew better. I knew she was just a person carrying more pain than most people could imagine, and I knew she needed someone to believe in her, so I brought her to the mountains, and we healed each other." "Is that why we tell stories about Grandma and Grandpa Morgan even though they died before I was born?" James asked. "Exactly," Victoria said. "We tell those stories because they are part of who we are. The love I had for them did not die when they did. It lives on in our family, in the values they taught me and the memories we keep alive. And we tell stories about your sister Rose too, the one who died before you were born, because she is also part of our family even though she is not here." "I think I understand," James said slowly. "Love does not end just because people die." "That's exactly right," Deacon said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are a wise boy, son." The family continued to grow. Over the next several years, Victoria gave birth to 3 more children, a boy they named William, twin girls they named Mary and Elizabeth. The cabin echoed with the sounds of children playing and learning, and the valley that had once been Deacon's lonely retreat became a place of life and laughter. Deacon proved to be a devoted father, patient and playful with his children, while also teaching them the skills they would need to survive in their mountain home. He took each child on individual excursions into the wilderness, tailoring the lessons to their interests and abilities. Victoria created a small schoolroom in one of the cabin's additions, determined that all her children would be educated and able to choose their own paths when they grew up. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Deacon and Victoria took a rare evening away from the children, leaving them in the care of James, who at 14 was responsible enough to manage his younger siblings for a few hours. They walked to their favorite spot in the valley, a small clearing by the stream where wildflowers grew thick and the view of the mountains was unobstructed. 10 years, Victoria said wonderingly. A decade since we stood in that little church and promised to love each other for life. It feels both impossibly long and impossibly short. It feels right, Deacon said simply. He took her hands in his. Victoria, you have given me a life I never dreamed I could have again. After I lost my first family, I thought that part of my life was over forever. I thought I would live alone in the mountains until I died, just a ghost going through the motions of survival. But you brought me back to life. You gave me children and purpose and a love that makes every day worth living. You saved me first, Victoria reminded him. When everyone else saw madness, you saw grief. When everyone else wanted to lock me away, you gave me freedom. You believed I could heal, and that belief gave me the strength to actually do it. Everything I have now, everything we have built together, started with your faith in me. We saved each other, Deacon said. That is what real love does. It does not fix or complete you, because you were never broken or incomplete, but it gives you strength to face the hard things and joy to celebrate the good things. It makes you more yourself, not less. They stood together in the fading light, holding each other and watching the sun paint the mountain peaks in shades of gold and rose. Victoria thought about the terrified young woman she had been, collapsing on a boardwalk with everyone declaring her mad. She thought about the grieving mountain man who had offered her sanctuary, and she thought about the family they had built together, all the love and laughter and hard-won healing that filled their mountain home. The doctor swore I had fits of madness, she said softly, repeating the words that had defined her at her lowest point. But you said you had fits of loving me only. And you were right, Deacon. What looked like madness was just love with nowhere to go. And now that love has somewhere to go. It has you and our children and this life we have built. It has a home. We both have a home now, Deacon said. Not just this cabin or this valley, but in each other. You are my home, Victoria, and I am yours. Everything else is just the walls and roof that shelter what we have built together. They kissed as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. Two people who had found each other in their darkest moments and built something luminous and lasting from their shared pain. Behind them, the cabin glowed with lamplight and the sounds of their children preparing for bed. Ahead of them stretched more years of life and love, with all the joys and sorrows that came with being human. As they walked back to the cabin hand in hand, Victoria felt profound gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. The grief and trauma that had once threatened to destroy her had instead led her to the love of her life and a family beyond her wildest dreams. She had learned that healing was not about forgetting or moving on, but about integrating the past into a future worth living. She had learned that what looked like madness to others could be simply love that needed time and space to transform. And she had learned that sometimes salvation came in unexpected forms, a mountain man with gentle hands and a heart big enough to hold both his own grief and hers, who had seen past her fits and her fear to the woman underneath, and who had loved her, not despite her brokenness but through it, until she was whole again. The years continued to pass in their mountain valley, each season bringing its own rhythms and challenges. The children grew tall and strong, learning the ways of the wilderness from their father and the ways of learning and civilization from their mother. James eventually built his own cabin on the far side of the valley, marrying a girl from town and starting his own family. Rose became a skilled herbalist and healer, using the plants of the mountains to help people in Lincoln and the surrounding settlements. William, Mary, and Elizabeth each found their own paths, some staying in the mountains and others venturing out to explore the wider world. But they all carried with them the lessons their parents had taught, that love is stronger than grief, that healing takes time and patience, and that family is built not just on blood but on the stories we tell and the love we share. Deacon and Victoria grew old together in the cabin he had built with his own hands, their bodies wearing down, but their love remaining as strong as ever. On cold winter nights, they would sit by the fire and remember their journey together, marveling at how far they had come from that desperate day in Lincoln when he had offered her sanctuary, and she had trusted him with her broken heart. "Do you ever regret it?" Victoria asked one evening when they were both well into their 60s. "Bringing me here instead of letting them send me to an asylum? It could not have been easy, taking on a woman with fits of madness." You never had fits of madness, Deacon said firmly, his voice still strong despite his years. You had fits of grief and love, and there is nothing wrong with that. As for regret, how could I regret the best decision I ever made? You gave me back my life, Victoria. You gave me children and grandchildren and a home full of love. You took my lonely mountain retreat and turned it into paradise. You did the same for me, Victoria said softly. You believed in me when no one else did. You saw past the fits and the fear to the woman underneath. You gave me time and space to heal, and you loved me through the worst of it. I have never forgotten that gift, Deacon, not for a single day. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire burn low. Outside, snow fell softly on the valley they had called home for more than 40 years. Inside, the walls were covered with carved animals Deacon had made over the decades, and drawings the children had created, and photographs documenting a life fully lived. I have fits of loving you only, Deacon said, repeating the words he had spoken so long ago. That has never changed, Victoria. Through all these years, through all the joys and sorrows, through raising children and burying parents and watching the world change around us, my love for you has been the one constant. You are the heartbeat of my life. And you are mine, Victoria said, taking his weathered hand in hers. The doctor swore I had fits of madness, but you knew better. You knew I was not mad but wounded, and you believed I could heal. Because of you, I got to have this life. Because of you, I got to be not just a woman with fits, but a wife and mother and grandmother. You gave me everything, Deacon Colter. We gave each other everything, Deacon corrected gently. That is what love does when it is real and true. It multiplies rather than divides. It transforms pain into strength and loss into wisdom. We built something beautiful here, Victoria. Something that will last long after we are gone. And it did last. When Deacon and Victoria eventually passed within days of each other in the way of couples who have been deeply connected for decades, they left behind a legacy of love and healing that rippled through generations. Their children told stories about the mountain man who had saved their mother from accusations of madness and given her space to heal. Their grandchildren told stories about the love that had transformed grief into joy and built a family in the wilderness. The valley remained in the family, with various descendants building their own cabins and creating their own lives in the shadow of the mountains Deacon and Victoria had loved. And visitors to the old original cabin, maintained now as a family shrine, could still feel the presence of the love that had started it all. A desperate woman collapsing on a boardwalk, a mountain man offering sanctuary, and two wounded souls finding healing in each other's arms. In the end, the story of Victoria Morgan and Deacon Colter became the kind of tale people told around fires on cold nights, a reminder that what looks like madness to some might be simply love, waiting for the right place and person to bloom. It became a testament to the power of patience and belief, proof that sometimes the best healing comes not from doctors or medicines or institutions, but from being seen and understood and loved exactly as you are. The doctor had sworn she had fits of madness, but the mountain man had known better. He had seen the truth that lay beneath the symptoms, the love and grief tangled together in a heart that needed time to unknot itself. And he had offered not treatment or cure, but simply space and presence and faith that healing would come in its own time. I have fits of loving her only, he had said, and that love had been enough. It had been enough to heal a broken heart, to build a family, to create a legacy that would last for generations. It had been enough to prove that sometimes the greatest medicine is simply being believed in, being given space to grieve and grow and become whole again in your own way and your own time. And in the quiet of the mountain valley where wildflowers still bloomed and streams still sang over smooth stones, that love remained, woven into the very fabric of the land, a testament to two people who had found each other at their darkest moments and built something luminous and lasting from their shared pain. The madwoman and the mountain man, the healer and the healed, two souls who had saved each other, and in doing so had created something that would never truly die. a love story written in mountain stone and pine trees, and the laughter of children who carried their legacy forward into an unknown but hopeful future.